McKay,
How you doing?
thanks for taking the time to be here.
No problem.
And you are with TCN, which is, and you're the marketing, what is it you do there?
Yeah, so I am the marketing director.
Okay.
Yep.
And this company, as I understand it, now this company was started in your family, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your dad started it or something. Do I have that right?
Yeah, he did. So my father, Terrell Bird, he started and founded the company in conjunction with a brother of mine, Jesse Bird.
Okay.
And that was back in 1999. And
whoa, this is 20, okay.
yeah,
Over
so
20
we're
years ago.
22 years ago. 20 years ago, coming up on 22 years. And the idea of the founding of the company started on voice broadcasting. And I don't know if you've heard of that term, voice broadcasting, but voice broadcasting is a one-way outbound communication. So like a reminder phone call, appointment reminder phone calls, like we can send out automated messages to phones. Okay. And this was all done on VoIP networks even before VoIP was, it was a thing, but nobody was talking about it. There was a few talking about it. Some of the big companies like Cisco and that were thinking about doing something with it. But Terrell and Jesse had the idea to take this technology and build upon it. And eventually, the company over the last 22 years, it's evolved into a full-fledged contact center suite or platform. So it's no longer just outbound phone calls or automated messages. It's inbound phone calls. It's chat applications on websites. It's two-way SMS. It's two-way email. So it's really grown over the years, but it's all because of this VoIP technology that was emerging back in the late 90s. So
I'm fascinated by this topic personally for a few reasons. One of them is I did work for a company called Teletech, which is now called T-Tech, in Denver, Colorado, and worked with them for a while. And I still know a lot of people back there. And it's a call center company. And what a lot of people don't realize is that, for example, when you call your bank, there's a really good chance that the person you're talking to is not an employee of that bank. They're actually an employee of a company that makes call centers, and they specialize in call centers. And then what they do is the bank hires them to create a call center, and then that company finds all the people. They know how to do the hiring process. They know how to get all the infrastructure set up. They know all the processes. And then they train those employees on the bank's stuff, and then they create all the secure connections and everything so they can access their software. But the person you're talking to, they feel like they're an employee of the bank, but they're actually an employee of the call center company. And so your software, you create the resources, as I understand it, that help a company like that create those call centers and create those the customer interaction, the tools that happen when you make a phone call, when you do an SMS, when you're doing online chat.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. And what we call those BPOs, we call them their outsourcers.
Business process outsourcing.
Yes, yeah, they are BPOs, but that's very common practice in the call center world. But yeah, we facilitate the communication, or we provide the software and the tools that BPO or that Teletech in this case would need to help their agents talk to customers, or banks customers, or whoever's outsourcing that.
And you're right when you say whoever, because you're talking about I won't mention any names, but people would be surprised how many different companies out there, big organizations, don't have their own employees answering the phone, where they've outsourced it to some organization. And you're, once again, you're the company.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And TCN is the company providing that software to those BPOs, but I wouldn't discount, because I think I was mentioning that I can rattle off a dozen companies, businesses that have in-house call centers. And that's not something also it's probably just as common as BPO, maybe even more so, but the larger scale call centers tend to get all the spotlight or all the media attention, like Teletech.
Yeah, and part of it is there's a lot of companies that need to to ramp up really quickly on a particular. So, for example, I know that sometimes with the government, they will have some big thing that comes up and they need to very rapidly create a call center where people can call in and get information. Yep. And so then they turn to some of these BPO companies who can just really, really quickly have your software, have the infrastructure, and then can make something happen really fast. Where I can think of 2 companies in Utah, just right off the top of my head, that have call centers just in-house. And so you're supporting all of it.
Yep.
You've got that, so this is such an interesting thing because you've created a tool. You have software that can literally be used all over the world by any company that has this need to have a call center or to interact. And so people kind of understand this is the thing where if you call into your bank and it says press 1 if you this or that, or press 8, and then your software is trying to route people either to an automated system that will help them more quickly or ultimately to the right person with the right expertise. That's what your software does.
So that's one aspect of it. That's IVR. It's what we call an IVR. Interactive voice response. But a lot of people don't realize all of that goes on behind the scenes, right? Not just with routing, but with the skills that the agents need, right? So some agents have language skills like Spanish and English and, French. I mean, there's hundreds of languages, and call centers need to also have the ability to put skills to agents based on the languages they speak. And so our software can help facilitate that as well, connecting them to the right agent, and then facilitating the script and the account information that's being pulled up. And, a lot of times us as consumers calling into a call center, we take that for granted and we just think it's just should work. And, I've been frustrated myself at many a times at IVRs because they are either designed poorly or they don't have a clear exit or a clear way to get to an agent.
The beauty of this conversation, what you've done here, because these little interviews we're doing are based on this idea of making a business in a smaller market, like right now we're in St. George, and to put a timestamp on it based on the year that you guys started. We're right now in 2021, right? Hopefully at the end of a pandemic, which actually kind of probably changed your world a little bit too, the world that TCN works in, just because there's so many things that started happening from home or over the phone and in a virtual world rather than in an in-person world. So imagine that changed your business at least a little bit, or it impacted it in some way.
I mean, I don't think there is a business that COVID hasn't affected. For TCN, I think because of our position and the way our software is set up, we are cloud-based. It allowed agents to transition to a work from home, right? So all you need is a computer, a headset, internet connection, and you're in the mainframe, or you can take calls, you can take chats, you can send emails on behalf of the company that you work for. The biggest challenge for a lot of our clients right when COVID hit was getting laptops for agents that didn't have a computer at home, or getting a headset for an agent that, they just didn't have the equipment at home. There was a huge rush on, just like many other things, there was a rush on equipment like headsets, laptops.
Headsets and toilet paper.
Yeah, headsets and toilet paper. But agents, they need in order to make them effective at home, they needed to get these tools. And so companies made a run on laptops and headsets. And, we helped with some of our connections with some of the providers that we had. We were able to help a few of our customers get some of those supplies they needed to be able to effectively have their agents transition from home. But I think for us, I think it's been pretty good, all in all, considering how devastating COVID has been around the world. But I think our software and our platform was built for scale and for at-home work.
Yeah, that's interesting because I know there are a lot of call center companies that had already started transitioning into that world anyway, where they were getting agents just around the world that were literally answering phones for a company just in their living room. And so that trend had already begun, and then this just probably just accelerated it.
Yeah, so we already had a few customers prior to COVID where they had agents working from home, but yeah, this was kind of a catalyst that pushed everybody to a work from home. But as things opened up, there's obviously a place for agents to work in a central location. There is some oversight that I think that needs to happen a lot of times, especially in a call center. And fortunately, TCN also has the tools to manage and to track and to record and transcribe these conversations for training and for bettering the customer experience, and as well as helping the agents do their job better.
So let's get into here you are running this company that literally, I'd imagine your software is used in all time zones. It's being used all over the place to manage these call center applications. And yet you're based here in St. George, Utah. That is where you started, right? I mean, the whole company started right here in St. George.
It was born here, and we haven't thought about leaving ever. And yeah, we've been here since day one.
And that's amazing. And interesting, 21 years ago when you started, or 22 now, I guess is what it would be. Now St. George is becoming more and more of a real serious community, a little city. It's much bigger than it even was just 22 years ago. It's grown dramatically. I mean, since then, I think the airport has changed locations and a lot of things. It's grown dramatically. So when you started, it was even way smaller than it is right now. And so where we want to take this conversation is, how does a company, facing all what would be the difficulties of a small community, how does a company succeed in a small community? So let's start off with that question, where you have it just being small and you have a smaller resource pool as far as talent goes. Once again, I moved here from Denver. The company that I've had, this little company up there, and organizations that I worked with up there, there was no shortage of, there's a few million people in the greater Denver area, and it's nothing near that here. And yet here you are, a tech company that has very specific needs, very specific skill set, I imagine, that you need for the software development and what have you. How do you overcome that hurdle of finding the right people?
Yeah, so fortunately, our founder, he is a coder or a programmer by trade. And so he was able to steer a lot of the software early on. And I feel like we've just been fortunate. I don't know if it's something we did particularly to find that talent, but early on, we've just been able to retain and hire, and as well as train. So having Dixie State University here, we've hired a lot of interns. And a lot of these interns, as they've worked at TCN and been able to shadow some of the senior developers, they've been able to get knowledge a lot quicker than they would, not trying to discount the need for school, but real world experience has a huge play in how we bring in our developers. So these interns, a lot of interns transition into full time, and they're still there. So we have a very, very strong relationship with the university, and we'll just continue to bring them in as interns or even full time. But the talent here is actually getting a lot better. Even in the last decade, there's been a lot more interest. I think it's just naturally nationwide, I think, just with everything moving to the cloud, and the whole infrastructure of how we do business is turning to computers, and it's just a job that's needed, and there is a growing trend around it. So it's
interesting. This topic of having the university close by, the people that we've interviewed so far in this little forum, that comes up all the time.
Okay.
Matter of fact, we actually have university students that work here in the studio. Cool. But what was the other company? InfoWest. Mm-hmm. They actually started. They're a very, very successful company here, and they started. I think they were students. And they've all had heavily involved with the university over the years, and so having that university in place, obviously, it's impacted your organization as well. So anyway, that seems to make a big difference in a small community like this, having that resource or having that talent pool or that up and coming talent pool.
Yeah, certainly. And I know InfoWest, they've been around longer than TCN, and they've done fantastic things for the community and as well as development of talent here. But yeah, the universities has been a wonderful resource, and I think will continue to be over, for generations.
Yeah. It's like I said, it seems to make a big difference for a lot of different organizations in a smaller community like this. How then? So here we're talking about the personnel. Do you, as an organization, how much of your workforce is based in this city, and how much of it do you have? Well, in different parts of the world. Yeah,
so TCN has 150-ish employees around the world, and we have about 85 here in St. George. Okay. So, and then we have an office actually in Salt Lake. That office is actually fairly small. It's more of a sales and support office, and then we have an office on the East Coast. There's about 14 to 15 there. And then we have an office in India, which does a lot of sales and support. And just with how big the market is there in India, there's about 20 or so, 25 there. And then we have a couple of kind of reps throughout the United States and Canada that don't really necessarily have an office, but they just kind of work from home and kind of travel from different offices and kind of fill in where they need.
So this is pretty interesting. So you have employees that are obviously now around the world, and you started in this little city, in southern Utah. So the company started here. I believe, if I heard this correctly, just because you were just here. I mean, it wasn't like, hey, let's go to St. George. It was, this is where we live. We're starting a company.
Exactly. It was. We had no desire or even the inclination to leave St. George because. Yeah, this is where we called home. This is where we want to be. So that leads to my next question. Why? You say this is where you want to be. What is it that makes this an attractive place to live or have a business? Well, St. George, at least, and I can speak for myself, just working there, I don't know if I know the founders would echo what I say, but the lifestyle here with the outdoors, with the proximity to Zion National Park, to the proximity to even Las Vegas, a lot of the conferences and a lot of the interaction that we attend and that we exhibit and we sponsor, a lot of them happen in Las Vegas. A lot of people sometimes don't realize that a lot of business happens in Las Vegas, but it allows us just for proximity of being able to do business in Vegas. But I think the town, St. George, has a very nice vibe just from the outdoors perspective. And I don't feel like there's any amenities lacking, for lack of a better word. But I think St. George is a very, a community that I believe will, growth in St. George has, I don't know, I feel like it's more than doubled in the time I've been here. But I think people are starting to recognize the amenities and as well as the attraction of the outdoor lifestyle and, just being able to live here and enjoy the weather. Yeah, that weather is a big thing. Yeah. It was one of the things that drove me here. I'm from Denver once again. Got to get out of that cold. I got tired of two things. I got tired of traffic, just so many people, and it just was so congested there that I couldn't stand it anymore. And the other thing was being cold.
And so I started, and a few years ago, I looked and I thought, wait a minute, I'm a grown man. I could live wherever I want to live. Why am I living here?
Yeah, you
and
reach
I'm a big fan
leave.
of Colorado, but it was one of those things where I thought, well, I don't like these two things, and I do have options. And getting back to what you said a second ago about Las Vegas, a lot of people, and we bring this up frequently in these conversations, I think a lot of people around the country don't understand, because you start thinking of Utah and St. George, Utah. This is not what you normally think of as Utah, which is most people skiing, cold,
Snow,
mountains, that kind of thing. And this is a different world down here. You can throw a rock from where we're sitting and hit Arizona. And you can, Las Vegas, if you're me, it takes about 90 minutes to get there. You know, it's not very far. People don't appreciate the fact, even though it's 2 states away from a drive standpoint, it's just this, it's right next door for all intents and purposes, which helps business, at least for me, having, even though St. George does have an airport and it's starting, you know, they're trying to grow it and expand it, it doesn't serve everything. And having that big airport right down the street to get kind of anywhere in the world very easily makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. Having the option in Vegas, I think is huge. Hopefully the airport, and it is growing, but having the option there, and a lot of people you can live in a town like St. George and still be successful. You know, a lot of people are starting to realize, especially with work from home, you don't need to be in these big cities anymore. And just in the last year, St. George has experienced, I think, huge growth because of that. And, you know, hopefully it will continue in the right trend, and it will kind of, you know, balance out over time.
So when you start talking about growth, the next thing that I want to jump into is just the infrastructure that's available. One of the challenges that I ran into when I moved down here was we had to have a location for the studio. Now, back in Denver, there's every shape and size of everything you could imagine somewhere. And you get down here, and it's a little bit different, where I had very, very limited, comparatively speaking, limited options to build a production studio. You know, and so from a facilities standpoint, has that been how have you dealt with that, or has that been a challenge for you? Where to house your build, and then once you're housed, you're expanding. Now what? You know, where do you expand to, and how do you handle that?
Yeah, so infrastructure, well, roads in St. George, for one, I think are getting better. But from an infrastructure standpoint, and where our location is, it had been a challenge early on. We were founded, and we actually operated out of a fairly small space, and we grew to a point where you'd say we were bursting at the seams, so to speak, and we kind of got to a point, okay, do we build? Is there something that we can do short term? Do we expand to a second campus across town and keep where we are currently? Fortunately for us, though, we about 4 years ago, maybe a little over 4 years ago, we found a space downtown St. George, and it fit our needs perfectly. We did a little bit of renovating, but it was fairly minor and some cosmetic, but it's suited our needs. There is, I guess in the last year, we've hired just over 20 individuals, and with work from home, we don't expect that to go on forever. But once employees start coming back to the office, we'll probably have to start thinking about some expansion opportunities. And that's something that the executive team is already looking at, and options of where to build, you know, second campus location, or, you know, if there's opportunities in the location that we have just with other tenants. So it has been a challenge, but I think the last few years we've covered that challenge, but we're kind of coming to a head where, yeah, the challenge is real. I know there is not a lot of companies like TCN in St. George, and just like with you, you know, trying to find a space for a studio, there just wasn't a lot of need to have a studio type building or build out, and we've run into that quite a bit. I know with Tech Ridge and a few other plazas that are coming in, I know there's a business park going in at the south end of the freeway and even at the north end of the freeway. A little bit different than Tech Ridge, but I think people are starting to realize like, hey, we got to get some commercial office space rather than typically what you'd see around town as like a strip mall or, limited space, I guess you could say. But it's been a challenge for sure, but I see hope on the horizon of some of the stuff that's going on.
Well, we definitely have a city and leadership here that's focused on the future.
Yep.
And thinking about, to your point, what do we need this, and to be thinking about that. I want to go back to this, as we're talking about infrastructure, and we just mentioned the airport a second ago. How much does that, a lack of a big airport, lack of a railroad, different things like that a lot of big cities have, does that impact you at all? Having an airport that's got limited capacity, that's close by, and not having we do have I-15 that runs through the middle of it. So, yeah. but some organizations that we speak to do a little bit of manufacturing here, need raw materials, but you don't need anything like that for what you do. So does that impact you? And if how, any of those things that we just listed?
Yeah. So it doesn't impact us at all. I know St. George has enough connections, like through when Phoenix opened up and then when Denver opened up, those are very big hubs that can kind of connect us to the world and as well as to other business hubs throughout North America. Vegas, again, 90 minutes, depending on who's driving, you can get there very quickly. So we never felt the airport. But it is getting better. The airport is getting better, but we never felt like the airport was something that hindered the way we do business. Yes, our teams do travel quite a bit, not right now, but they do travel. And a lot of them will fly out of Vegas. Some will fly directly out of St. George. And it really just depends on connections and arrivals. And, people will shop them both on some of our teams. But we've never felt like the airport was hindering our growth in any ways.
And once again, there's a focus here on expansion too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that over time you're just going to see more and more destinations.
Yeah, more connections. The airport will grow. I think I read somewhere that this was years ago that they designed specifically the airport, the layout, the land for growth. Right, they designed it to add on to add another runway to.
When you go out there, you can see. It's just like tons of space out there. They
planned it specifically for growth because they knew. You talk about city leadership. They knew that St. George was growing. Well, just by the numbers, they can see that it's growing and that there would be a need for a bigger airport and more connections. And as they do that, more. Other airlines and more flights will be coming in. So
let's talk about that for a second. You mentioned that once again, the city leadership. Operating a business, let's just talk about it on two different levels, a local level in St. George, but then on a greater level of just the state of Utah. Mm-hmm. What things, advantages, disadvantages, what could the city and state be doing better? And what are the things that they're doing right that would make a difference for an organization like yours?
I think so. Yeah, you talk about state and then local, and sometimes I feel like St. George gets the short end of the stick, especially when we're trying to be compared to Silicon Slopes or what's going on in Lehigh. I do think the state should. I don't know if share is the right word, but maybe put into some infrastructure. For Southern Utah that potentially might help bridge the gap between what is going on in Utah County and Salt Lake counties down here in Washington County. And I think with the relationship with Silicon Slopes in the last year, maybe 2 years, we've seen that relationship get better. And I think it's testament to what's going on up at Tech Ridge and kind of the programs that are coming out of Dixie State University. On a local level, I I think the city has done the best they can. I think we'd love to see them continually to be involved with companies on a university level, and as well as being able to hear our concerns as well, just from what we're seeing, from what our employees are experiencing, and then just keep doing what they're doing with the city plan. Something that our employees, at least on my team, they've commented on how amazing our trail system is, right? And that's something that's maintained by the city, that a lot of people, they use it as an amenity, but they don't realize the amount of time and the planning and the money involved to have that, to have that infrastructure in place. And they just need to keep it up, because what they're doing, it's working. And I think it's a testament. I think you mentioned earlier, it's a testament to the planning that they put into it early on.
I'm glad you brought that up, the trails, because it is one of the great things about being in a place like this is the amount of time and energy that's put into the outdoors thing, everything outdoors related. And there's this great relationship between, at least from what I've seen, business and the protecting this beautiful world, this place that we live. That's really, you mentioned Zion just a minute ago. Mm-hmm. You know, that's one of the most beautiful. I mean, I talk to people in part of my business. I talk to people all over the country, at least, and just about. I can't tell you how often I talk to people that have driven through St. George because they've been to Zion's National Park before, and they will talk. I was on a big video set, production set out in Denver a week ago, and I mentioned that I was down here, and they started talking about Zion National Park, and several people are like, oh my gosh, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, and it's part of what is attractive about this place is that we have this great city that's supportive of business and what have you, but we also have this very, very attractive place to just be. And I think you mentioned Zion's earlier. It's not that far to get to the Grand Canyon from here. You know, there's so many fascinating things. And you mentioned the trails. And the trails, somebody sitting in this stool just a few weeks ago, we had this conversation, said you're something like you're 5 minutes away from being away from everything when you're here. And I thought that's actually really, really important. I mean, some of the most beautiful hikes that you could go on. I mean, I think of Padre Canyon, it's 10 minutes from here? Mm-hmm. And you can feel like you're out in the middle of nowhere 10 minutes from now if you want to. Yeah. Climb up into this thing, you're down in this crazy canyon and all this amazing stuff, and it's right there.
It's funny that, I was on a conference call just last week, and again, you throw out people, and we were talking about association, like, oh, you're from Utah, but they don't associate Utah they associate it with the snow, but they don't associate it with the Southwest. And I'm like, well, we're closer to Vegas than we are to Salt Lake, and we're in the desert, and and then you have to throw out something like Zion. Have you heard of Zion? And they're like, oh yeah, we've been there.
Has that, being in a small community or being from a small community or based in a smaller community, does that impact your relationship with these organizations that are paying for your software? In other words, does that go into their decision making to work with you? Is that ever an issue?
No, it hasn't. I actually think being from a community like this has its advantages because it makes us lean and nimble and quick on our feet. Not trying to discount some of our bigger competitors, but there is some advantages to kind of flying under the radar in both technology and being able to provide the service to our customers. But I don't think it's ever been an indication of whether or not a customer will do business with us by any means.
That's a really important thing to know, and an important issue, because the fact that a company like yours, and there's many examples of this where you're not taken any less seriously because of where you're located.
Yep.
This is being in a smaller community like this. You can have the lifestyle that you want, live in a place that you want to live, and still have a wildly successful organization. And it's amazing watching companies like yours and some of the other people that have been sitting in here that are literally doing business all over the world. And they started in a garage here in St. George, and now they're this this big organization. I think that's just fascinating to me that happened, and often it's finding that thing in the small community that no one's serving right now. In some cases, and in your case, you're stepping into a world that is being served by other organizations in different ways. And so let's just wrap this up with a couple different things. I want to know just a little bit more about you talked a little bit about how it started, but just maybe the genesis story of this started because of why. And then tell me a little bit about what the future is from here.
Yeah, so TCN was, again, founded in 1999. And Terrell, the founder, who was my father, he was actually running a successful steel and propane manufacturing company in Northern Ontario in Canada. And he, just like you, wanted to get out of the cold and kind of provide maybe a different lifestyle and pace of life for his family. Just picked St. George. He had been to St. George before and always had thought, I'm going to live there one day, and uprooted his family to St. George. And in the process, it took several years. He sold his company and some of his operations up in Northern Ontario. And with his spare time, started kind of dabbling with VoIP with some of his kids and some other key stakeholders in the very, very beginning. And TCN was born as a simple voice broadcasting product. And then today, 22 years later, we are a full-fledged call center suite that provides omni-channel. We call it omni-channel communication. So it's voice, email, text, chat applications for call centers. So a lot of people get that confused, that they think we are a call center, but we are just providing the means for a call center to facilitate their communications and their business. But on top of that, we also offer some workforce optimization and reporting, call recording, transcription for flagging and tagging, being able to do future training for agents. And there's a whole slew of tools that go into running a call center. But the future is really bright for TCN. We'll continue to build on our core platform, constantly improving on it. Our founder is actually very interested in AI and some machine learning, so we're going to continue trying to implement. We do have a couple of AI and machine learning instances integrated into some of our platforms, so we'll continue to integrate and put some of those technologies into our software. So, as the future and as these trends change, I think the TCN software, and we'll continue to pivot. We'll just continue to be at the forefront as best we can and be able to provide the best call center software to the industry.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how do people, how do they find out about your company? How do they get a hold of you? Where do they learn more about your...
Yeah, so to learn more about TCN, the individuals can go to www.tcn.com to learn more, and we have a ton of information on our website. Our resources area is just chock full of all sorts of stuff. I think you could get lost for days just consuming material, but yeah, tcn.com would be the best way to get hold of us and to learn more.
That's awesome. McKay, this is absolutely fascinating. I appreciate you taking the time to talk this stuff through.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Robert.
That's awesome.